Hello, it's Riley. Sorry for the lack of videos lately. I have been very busy and didn't have time to edit anything. So today I'm going to show you my favorites of the drawings I have done for my last class last semester, fall 2016, which was drawing fundamentals. And we used big papers and we also used sketchbook. So I'll show you the sketchbook first. Those are just my doodles and warm-ups and things like that. This was my graphite exploration, which is where I tested out the graphite pencils that we got for class. This is my ballpoint pen exploration, where I tested out my ballpoint pen, which I also got for class and I ended up really loving. It's my favorite pen. This was with graphite, charcoal, and pen. This was with charcoal, I believe. This is a gesture drawing, which is, if you don't know or haven't taken a class like this, it's just to get used to the movement or whatever the subjects are doing. So in this case they were looking at their phones, which isn't that interesting, but it was all I could catch people doing at the time. Here's a gesture with charcoal of a napkin at the edge of the table. You can't really tell what it is, unfortunately, but I thought it looked cool anyway. This was my mom cooking or cleaning at the sink, I don't remember which. This was my girlfriend's cats eating food. This was another of my girlfriend's cats just sitting in the yard. This was a blind contour, which is where you just look at the subject and you don't look at the paper, so you don't know where your lines end up. So this was a candle and probably a book. This was a self-portrait, which I ended up really liking. I think it looks kind of cool. This was a pencil pouch and my phone. This was a potted plant. I ended up liking this one a lot too. And this was a chair outside. These I'm just going to flip through because these aren't that interesting. They're just to show the topography of the subject. But you can't really tell what any of this was. This was a flashlight, but most of this you can't tell what it was. This is an outline of negative space of a setup in the classroom. This was some chairs in the backyard. This was the bottom of the table in the backyard. I loved this and ended up doing a bigger version of this. And this was a bucket of plants. Pot of plants, rather. And this was a plant and a pot of plants on a table. Now, this was at a cabin we stayed at in Big Bear. This was the fireplace, complete with a bear at the top of the fireplace, which I did not approve of, but it made for a cool drawing. This was the bar area in my house. This is the dresser and shelves in my room. This is a candle, the same candle I drew earlier. These are some ellipse or circle studies and cylinders, stuff like that. This was a black and white reduction of a tissue box and some other stuff over here, another box. And this was a pony black and white reduction. This didn't turn out very good, but it was fun to do anyway. Candle and eraser. This is, for these next four, I think I copied from a picture. So this wasn't copying from a real subject, but they turned out cool anyway. What did I just press? I pressed something on my camera. Oh well. So then there's the cube, the cone, and the pear, which I ended up loving. This was some drapery studies. This was a towel in my bathroom. And this was a blanket put over a fan in my bedroom. And I believe that is it for the sketchbook, so I'll move on to my bigger drawings. This is my newsprint, which is thinner, cheaper paper. So I did more sketches and stuff on this. This was my very first drawing I did in the class. Okay, yeah, so this was the very first drawing I did. It was just to explore the charcoals and erasers. This was some hands, all my hands. Some blind contour sketches of hands. I don't know what this was, to be honest. Some perspective practice, I think. Some more perspective. More perspective. Cylinder perspective and circles. These were sketches of classmates. We did kind of a fully clothed life drawing thing at the very end of class. So I drew maybe 4 or 5 of my classmates here. This was all in charcoal. This one ended up cool. That was a cool pose he did. And I like this one too. I believe that is it for my newsprint. These were a series of gesture drawings of hands. What's this? This is a blank piece of newsprint, the most interesting thing in this video. These are some other gesture hands. Really like the Spider-Man one there. Some blind contours of hands and some other objects up there. Perspective study. This one was fun. These are all from early on in the class. This was my first big drawing, I think, of a plant. Obviously, I had a lot of trouble down at the bottom of the perspective of the table because this was before we learned about perspective. So all this was this is the most I could erase it. But the plant looks cool. This was a charcoal lift of a sewing machine. So what I did was I covered the whole thing in charcoal and then erased away the white parts. These were some branch studies, just a branch I found in my backyard. This was the table that I told you about that I sketched in my sketchbook and then did a line drawing of this. And I think these are all my really bad paintings, so these were not from class. These were from my final, I think. So this was just skull practice. We had little skull statues in class. This one I ended up really liking. This was another of my finals. We just had some objects on the table in the room and we all gathered around the objects and drew them. This was a self-portrait done with charcoal and it was a charcoal lift. This was a person's head, a statue's head actually. We drew statues in class. And this I didn't end up finishing. This was a self-portrait. This was the last thing I did not finish. This was more drapery studies. This was drawn off of a piece of paper. I didn't draw this from a reference in the room. It was from a piece of paper. And this was another self-portrait.
Alright, that is it for this video, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!